It is afternoon at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where an American astronaut and a Russian cosmonaut are aboard a Soyuz spacecraft 160 feet atop a Soyuz booster, ready to launch in a little more than an hour from now at 3:40 a.m. Central Time or 2:40 p.m. local time in Baikonur. We're looking at a live view of the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolev, Russia, where the team is on console, ready to support that launch. Launch controllers are watching over all systems aboard the rocket, which is now fully fueled and ready for launch, and no issues have been tracked throughout the day, which began with fuel and oxidizer loading at about 10:40 p.m. Central Time Wednesday night or 9:40 a.m. Thursday morning out at the launch site in Baikonur. That was completed about 2 hours later, and the launch vehicle's control systems have been prepared, and the gyros will be activated momentarily. Good morning from the International Space Station Flight Control Room. This is Mission Control Houston, and I'm Brandy Dean. Along with the flight control teams around the world supporting the space station programs here in Mission Control, the team is watching over Expedition 57 crew and space station systems and is preparing to support the increase from 3 to 5 crew members that will happen today when Alexei Ovchinin and Nick Hague launch to the International Space Station. That will increase the crew from 3 to 5, and then those two will actually be reaching the International Space Station after just 4 orbits of the Earth today, with docking scheduled for 9:44 a.m. Central Time, just 6 hours after launch. It's been more than a year now since we've seen a Soyuz launch employ the same day 4-orbit space flight. The last time was September 2017 for launch of the Expedition 53 crew. Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft will be docking with the Russian Poisk module at a port on the space-facing side of the segment of the space station. The crew will join the 3 current space station residents on board: NASA astronaut Serena Anand-Chancellor, Russian cosmonaut Sergei Prokopyev, and ESA astronaut and current space station commander Alexander Gerst. They arrived at the station aboard Soyuz MS-09 on the 8th of June and still have a couple of months left in their stay. Here in Houston, the team in Mission Control will be monitoring today's launch and getting updates on the flight from their Russian counterparts. Flight Director Mary Lawrence is on console now for the Soyuz launch, and ESA astronaut Andy Mogensen will be today's Capcom. You can see them here in this live view from Mission Control Houston. During the Soyuz's climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and routed to the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. Again, that's the live view here, and you can see a view inside the capsule where the astronauts are already on board and ready to go. As we go through today's activities, if you have questions about the Soyuz launch that you'd like answered during our show, you can ask us on Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA. Today's spaceflight will be the first for NASA's astronaut Nick Hague and the second for cosmonaut and Soyuz MS-10 commander Alexei Ovchinin. NASA astronaut Nick Hague was selected to be an astronaut in 2013 and is the first member of his class to launch to space. The Kansas native is colonel in the U.S. Air Force and holds a bachelor's degree in astronautical engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, as well as a master's degree in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In late 2004, he deployed for 5 months to Iraq in support of Operations Iraqi Freedom, and then in 2009, Hague was selected for the Air Force Fellows Program in Washington, D.C., where he spent some time as a staff member in the United States Senate. He later served in the Pentagon as a Congressional Appropriations Liaison for the United States Central Command. Hague was selected as an astronaut as part of NASA's 21st astronaut class and completed the 2-year astronaut candidate training in July of 2015. That highly specialized training includes scientific and technical briefings, intensive instructions in International Space Station systems, spacewalks, and robotics, as well as Russian language training, physiological training, T-38 flight training, and water and wilderness survival training. He's been supported along the way by his wife, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Katie Haig, and their 2 sons. And as a military family, they are very familiar with lengthy deployments of both parents and are ready to share in this unique one together. Haig will be serving along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin, who is returning to the space station for his second stated day. Born in Rybinsk, Russia, Ovchinin graduated from the Eysk Air Force Pilot School as a pilot engineer in 1992 and went on to serve as an instructor pilot. Ovchinin also served as an air flight commander at the Krasnodar Aviation Institute, logging over 1,300 hours of flight time before becoming a cosmonaut. He was selected as a cosmonaut candidate in October of 2006 and qualified as a test cosmonaut in June of 2009. Ovchinin's first trip to the space station came in March of 2016 as part of the expedition's 47 and 48 crew. Earlier this year, he performed backup duties for recently returned MS-08 crew, and now, as a member of the Prime crew, he will serve as a flight engineer as well as a Soyuz MS-10 commander. We're now 1 hour and 3 minutes away from today's launch, and you're seeing a live view here inside the Soyuz where the crew is on board. You've got Nick Hague at the top of your screen and just visible Alexei Ovchinin at the bottom. They again are planning to launch today at 3:40 a.m. Central Time, just a little over an hour from now. This mission launches under the call sign Burlak, chosen by Soyuz commander Alexei Ovchinin. The term dates back to the 17th century in Russian history and means barge puller. Refers to the worker who manually shoulders a rope to haul large vessels along a canal. The cruise patch was designed by Luc van den Abbenlin and shows the Soyuz flying high above the Earth, flanked by the Russian and American flags. To the left is the International Space Station, and to the right, the angle of the logo indicates the direction of future human spaceflight to the moon and on to deep space. The crew members' names are displayed above the Soyuz, and all of this is set against the silhouette of an owl, symbolizing the scientific wisdom to be gained from research performed on board the space station. Installed on the Soyuz instrument panel during the crew's in-cabin pre-launch preparation activities last week are the 2 talismans and zero-G indicators that you might see hanging over the onboard crew during the ascent. We have a small toy dog belonging to the son of Alexei Ovchinin and a small toy falcon, which is the mascot of Nick Hague's alma mater, the U.S. Air Force Academy. Atop the rocket and within the Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft, Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin are now 1 hour and 1 minute away from launch. As we wait for their journey to the International Space Station to begin, let's take a few moments to hear how NASA's Nick Hague got from the little town of Hoxsey, Kansas to the top of this rocket and who he has to thank.
I grew up in western Kansas, and I love figuring out how things work. When I was young, I liked breaking things and putting them back together. My entry into aviation started as a flight test engineer. I was an engineer working in a laboratory designing satellite systems and was accepted into the Air Force Test Pilot School. I think that the amazing experience was just the breadth of airframes that I was able to explore and to test out. Everything from the most complicated fighters that we have out there to home-built aircraft. And that diversity of exposure really scratched my engineering itch to really get an understanding of what aviation's about. So my wife and I are both graduates of the Air Force Academy. The Air Force is the only way we would have ever met. My wife is from New York. I'm from Kansas. Our paths would have never crossed, so we owe everything to the Air Force and the Air Force Academy for bringing us together. We're both in service. We're both committed to serving our country. But more importantly, I think it's committed to serving something larger than ourselves. It's all about teamwork. Every assignment I've had, I've been part of a team. And that idea of you're going to be reliant on the people around you for success and defining your success not on your accomplishments but on the team accomplishments, that's something that Air Force instilled in me and gave me the opportunity to grow and refine. Human space exploration is the ultimate team sport. We've got a team of 6 people on orbit. We're going to have a team of 5 people on orbit for my expeditions. We've got a team of over 100,000 people on the ground that are supporting us on a daily basis. You don't do these things individually. There's no success that's gained individually in space exploration. It's all about the team. I'm Colonel Nick Hague, and I'm a NASA astronaut.
We're back now with a live view at the Russian Flight Control Center in Moscow, where the team there is supporting today's launch, now 57 minutes away, of Alexei Ovchinin and Nick Hague to the International Space Station. As we wait for today's launch, we're answering Ask NASA questions. You can send those to us via Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA, and we have a couple of them that we're going to go ahead and take right now. Here's the first one from Pharaoh J, asking why are there only 2 astronauts on this Soyuz, and that is actually because the Roscosmos has elected to remove one of the crew members who originally had been scheduled to fly, as they have had a delay in launching a new laboratory for the Russian segment of the space station. They're waiting to fly additional members when they have that new laboratory, and will be able to use their time wisely. And then we also have a question from Christopher asking, will the crew dock to the space station today? And that is, the answer to that is yes. Yeah, the crew will actually be docking at 9:45 a.m. Central Time today. That's just a few hours after they launch. For the first time in about a year, we'll be docking on the same day as launch to the International Space Station. So you can stay tuned in to NASA TV to see that not long after launch. It's been a long road for the crew training in the U.S. and Russia before they finally got to Baikonur, Kazakhstan for their final launch preparations, but they know they're finally getting close when they see some of the traditional activities that we're going to take a look at here in some video that's been recorded over the course of their launch today. Having a little bit of technical difficulty with that video, so we will get that to you in just a moment. In the meantime, one more reminder to send your questions to us in using the hashtag AskNASA on Twitter. We'll try and take some more of those later in the show. Okay, and this is the video of today of the pre-launch activities that we've just been waiting for. This is the crew signing the door of the Cosmonaut Hotel where they've been staying as they went through their pre-launch activities. The crew does most of their training in the U.S. and in Moscow, but then journeys to Baikonur just a couple weeks before their actual launch for the final preparations. They stay at the Cosmonaut Hotel while they do that, and then sign the door before they launch. They were awakened at 6:40 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday afternoon, or 5:40 a.m. local time in Baikonur today, about 9 hours prior to launch. And they begin participating in these final pre-launch activities. It was a blessing by a Russian Orthodox priest who also blessed the Soyuz itself the day before. Now you can see the crew here departing for the launch pad. Crew members boarded the bus for the ride to the integration and suit-up facility at Building 254 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome at about 9:40 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday night, or 8:40 a.m. Thursday morning. Alexei Ovchinin here on the left side of the screen, and NASA's Nick Hague on the right. This again is video taken earlier today. Friends and family waving goodbye as they leave the Baikonur Cosmonaut Hotel and make their way to the integration and suit-up facility. Crew arrived at the Integration and Suit-up Facility, Building 254, today at about 10:25 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, or 9:25 a.m. Thursday morning in Baikonur. There, each crew member underwent final medical exams and suited up in their Sokol launch and entry suits. Suits were then pressurized to ensure that the integrity of their seals was good. The actual suit-up activities began about 11:10 p.m. Central on Wednesday night, or 10:10 a.m. in Baikonur, all about 4.5 hours prior to launch. This is the crew going through those leak checks. First, Alexei Ovchinin went through his, and you can see Nick Hague enjoying a little downtime there while he undergoes those. And backup crew members here supporting the crew as they go through these final launch preparations. That's their final duties as backups before they depart and say their goodbyes to the prime crew just before they get on their Soyuz. Nick Hague there sitting next to Canadian Space Agency astronaut David Saint-Jacques, who will be launching in December. And Hague switching places with Ovchin now, getting ready for his own leak check. Separated from the crew by a pane of glass, there's a number of friends and family, and also NASA and Roscosmos officials there watching. Pane of glass keeps the crew's quarantine intact, so they don't risk getting any germs from the people there to see them off. And with those suit leak checks complete, the crew then gets to move to the pane of glass and talk directly with the people on the other side through the microphones that you can see. Again, this keeps their quarantine status secure, protects them from any germs that their well-wishers may be carrying. This is a chance for final goodbyes with the people who are in Baikonur to see them off, as well as a little bit of time for the crew members to relax before they head to the launch pad.
That's Graham's job to worry.
Yeah. I don't know, not for a while.
I just wanted to say, Katie, nice stuff. We love you, man.
I love the fact that he's on his phone. When I got sworn in to be the NASA administrator, vice president, came to the NASA headquarters, he was swearing in. And my 6-year-old honestly told me his mom's lap. It's good. Congratulations on all you've done. Best of luck. And I cannot wait to see what you come home. Look forward to so we can stay connected when you're up there.
There among the well-wishers was NASA Administrator Jen Bridenstine, offering his congratulations and final goodbye to Nick Hague. This was Bridenstine's first trip to Baikonur and his first chance to see a Soyuz launch. Coming up now, just 45 minutes away.
Как настроение ваше? Very good.
И как вы?
We are ready.
Это радует. Я думаю, что в ноябре, когда состоится конференция, посвященная 20-летию
That in November,
Международной космической станции, мы будем совсем в полной мере уверены в том, как будем двигаться дальше.
International
Well, I just want to say how proud all of us are of all of you, how much hard work you put in, and what an important partner for the United States of America and for Russia. Of course, you guys are very well trained, very well prepared, but you're also an amazing example of collaborative partnership in space.
Чтобы у вас все шло штатного полета.
We wish you a nominal flight. May everything go nominal.
Переживать, и у вас будет правильно и хорошо.
Don't worry, everything will go smoothly, everything will go well. May you have a successful flight, and may you have successful completion of the space program and of the science program while you are on board the ISS.
Take good care of Station 4.
Following those final farewells, the crew members then walked out and waved farewell to the group.
We are ready to support
The group gathered to see them off. They will, from here, board a bus. That took place at 12:40 a.m. Central Time or 11:40 a.m. in Baikonur. Bus is their final ride to their launch pad. Drive that takes about 25 minutes, so they arrived at the launch pad at 1:05 a.m. Central Time today, 12:05 p.m. in Baikonur.
Honorable Representative of the State Commission, we are reporting readiness for the flight. Okay, ready, let's go.
Nick Hague and now Alexei Ovchinin making their way up to the elevator that will take them to the top of the Soyuz to board.
May God bless you.
These are their
Go on your way.
final goodbyes from the stairs of the launch pad before they get on that elevator. And that was the image of them getting on the elevator. There we go. Making their way from here to the top of the Soyuz, which will take them to the International Space Station today, following launch at 3:40 a.m. Central Time. They've been on board now for almost 2 hours. We're back now with a live view of the Soyuz on the launch pad in Baikonur, now 40 minutes away from today's launch, which again is coming up at 3:40 a.m. Central Time. While we're waiting for launch, which is now 38 minutes away, we'll take a few minutes to answer a few of the questions coming in via social media. First one here from Gosiki. Any information on what the zero-G mascots will be? Gosiki apparently loves those. We do have that information. We'll have two mascots today. One will be a small toy dog that belongs to the son of Alexei Ovchinin, and then there will also be a small toy falcon, which is a mascot from Nick Hague's alma mater, the U.S. Air Force Academy. Our next question is from Declan Lee, asking if there is any chance of a 3-day rendezvous on today's flight. There's always a chance that it could happen. We're definitely not expecting it. We are hoping and planning for a 4-orbit rendezvous, and we expect to see the crew reach the International Space Station at 9:44 a.m. Central Time today. You can stay tuned in to NASA TV for that. And then a final question for now from Waldemar, who is asking, do the astronauts do any jobs while they're on the Soyuz on the way to the space station? Their primary job, especially on a short turnaround like this, is to monitor systems and make sure everything is going as planned for their arrival at the International Space Station, though if needed, they could take over and bring the Soyuz in for its docking. Top the rocket, and within the Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft again are Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin, now 36 minutes away from launch. And as the clocks count down to the launch of the Soyuz MS-10 crew to the International Space Station, NASA's Nick Hague took some time during his training to weigh in on a popular space cinema debate, share his favorite flavor combos, and a few other little-known facts about himself.
So we're an Air Force family, something you may not know about us. I met my wife at the Air Force Academy back in 1996 when we were in the same squadron. I was from Kansas. She was from New York City. We never would have crossed paths hadn't been for the Air Force Academy. So a question I get all the time is, are you a Star Trek fan or a Star Wars fan? But rarely does anybody ask me about Doctor Who. And that's a show that I grew up watching on PBS when I was young, and it got me hooked into sci-fi, and I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy any type of sci-fi movie. So Doctor Who was a staple when I was growing up. Something that my wife introduced me to was yoga. And so we're regular practitioners of yoga. And I got to tell you, I am extremely thankful that she got me hooked, because being crammed up inside the descent module of the Soyuz capsule with your knees in your chest for hours on end is a lot easier after putting yourself through a few hours of torture doing yoga. I don't know if torture was the right word, but growing up in a small school, I got to play every sport. But the thing that really got me hooked and that was my passion was baseball. I was a pitcher, and so one of the things I did when I got to the Air Force Academy was walk on to the baseball team. And I played for a couple years there on the junior varsity team, and then got a chance to throw an inning at the varsity level. And then after that, they decided that my hobby was not going to go anywhere, and I got cut. So everybody has their individual tastes. When it comes to food, it's peanut butter and chocolate for me. That's an addiction I have. Who doesn't love a bowl of peanut butter and chocolate ice cream? The other thing that I really enjoy is crushed red pepper and garlic. If you put garlic on anything, it makes it taste better. So those are the things I crave when it comes to food.
Back now with the live view of the Soyuz on the launch pad in Baikonur, and that was a look at Nick Hague, who will be spending just over 6 months as a flight engineer on Expedition 5758 before returning to Earth with Alexei Ovchinin, who is, of course, launching with him today. We're now 32 minutes before launch, with liftoff scheduled for 3:40 a.m. Central Time or 2:40 p.m. local time in Baikonur. Still seeing here a live view of from the launch pad in Baikonur as the preparations are ongoing for today's launch, now in 32 minutes. And as we wait for that launch, we'll take a few more Twitter questions. Again, you can send yours in using the hashtag AskNASA. And our first question for this round comes from Brender, who is asking how many days will the crew be on board the International Space Station? And they'll be there a little bit more than 6 months. We generally plan for about 6-month missions, although things can happen and they can be a little shorter or even a little longer. Of course, our longest continuous mission was Scott Kelly's 1-year mission in 2015. Next question comes from EK2, asking, do astronauts have restrictions on the type of music they listen to while at the space station? And no, they're allowed to take up whatever music they want. They actually spend some time before flight selecting some of the music that they want to be sure and have with them, any things like movies or reading material that they know that they'll want as well, things that will help them fill what free time they have, although they generally say that they end up filling most of that by looking out the windows at the space station. And along the same line, we have Laura asking, do the crew use radio while they aren't working? And although they do have music that they can listen to, as we just discussed, one of the things that they use ham radio for is talking with people here on the ground. The crew members are able to use ham radio to talk to, in particular, school children all around the world. And you can find out more about that on the NASA website. Seeing here a live view inside the Soyuz capsule, and just a moment ago you saw a wave from Nick Hague, who is at the top of the screen, getting ready to make his first journey to the International Space Station in just 30 minutes. His crewmate Alexei Ovchinin is just in view, a little obscured on the bottom half of the screen. Emblazoned on this rocket that's now less than 30 minutes away from launching is an image celebrating 2018 as the 20th anniversary of the first element of the International Space Station. That'll be coming up this November, anniversary of the Zarya module launching to the International Space Station. That was the first element to make its way into space. It launched from Baikonur Cosmos, Kazakhstan, on top of an autonomous Russian Proton rocket on November 20th of 1998. On December 4th, 2 weeks after Zarya's successful insertion into orbit, NASA launched Node 1, known as Unity, aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour on flight STS-88 from the Florida coast of the United States. NASA astronaut Nancy Curry used the Space Shuttle's Canadian-built robotic arm, Canadarm, to place Unity on the orbiter docking system in the Space Shuttle's payload bay, and then after a series of orbital rendezvous maneuvers completed by Space Shuttle Commander Bob Cabana, Curry used the robotic arm to capture and berth Zarya to Unity on December 6th. That was a video of Curry there. NASA astronauts Jerry Ross and Jim Newman then performed 2 spacewalks to connect power and data cables between the 2 vehicles. In the show of international cooperation, Endeavour's astronauts entered the new International Space Station for the first time on December 10, 1998, with Commander Bob Cabana and Russian cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev opening the hatch of the Unity node and floating into the new station together. Just a reminder that I'm answering Soyuz launch questions, and if you have one, you can tweet it to us using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll take a few more now, starting with one from Akil, who is asking what the objective of this mission is. And the objective of all the International Space Station missions is primarily science. We have a lot to learn about what it takes to allow humans to live safely and healthily in space, and one of the ways we learn about that is by having people live in space for long durations on board the International Space Station. There's also a lot of other different types of science they can do for the benefit of us here on Earth as well. So in all, the astronauts usually take part in about 250 different science experiments over the course of their mission. And then Teresa Boyd is asking, do American astronauts need to learn Russian, and do the cosmonauts learn English? And yes, all the astronauts, even those from Europe and Canada or Japan, are supposed to be able to speak both English and Russian on board the International Space Station. That's part of the initial training that astronaut candidates go through when they report for duty for their initial astronaut training. Welcome once again to our live coverage of the launch of Nick Hague and Lexi Ovchinin to the International Space Station. The launch pad service structures components have been lowered and the clamshell gantry service towers have been retracted in preparation for liftoff. And suit leak checks are now underway. Those begin around 3:03 a.m. Central Time, and the emergency escape system has been armed. This escape tower would fire in the event of a problem during launch. The system is designed to pull the spacecraft and the crew clear of the booster, enabling the Soyuz capsule to parachute to a safe landing in the event of an emergency during launch or the early stages of the climb to orbit. As we get closer to launch, we'll see several other events unfold. At 4 minutes prior to launch, the combustion chamber nitrogen purge begins. And then at T-minus 2 minutes and 45 seconds, booster propellant tank pressurization takes place. Events continue as the first umbilical tower separates at T-minus 35 seconds, and the second umbilical tower separates at T-minus 15 seconds. Then at T-minus 12 seconds, the launch command is issued, culminating in launch of the Soyuz spacecraft as the countdown clock reaches 0 at 3:40 a.m. Central Time or 2:40 p.m. local time in Baikonur. Now 22 minutes away from today's launch, again coming up at 3:40 a.m. Central. During the Soyuz's climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry from the Soyuz vehicle is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and routed to the launch control blockhouse near the launch pad in Baikonur, and then to the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. The flight's then controlled from Baikonur until shutdown of the third stage engine when it is transitioned to the Russian Flight Control Center. During that climb to orbit, we'll see a number of activities take place. The first will be the first stage shutdown, which comes at 1 minute and 58 seconds into flight. That's followed by the jettison of the shroud that covers the Soyuz at 2 minutes and 41 seconds. And then at 4 minutes and 47 seconds, we'll see the second stage shutdown and its jettison. At 4 minutes and 57 seconds, the third stage ignites, and then it lasts until the 8-minute and 45-second mark where it shuts down and the spacecraft separates from the rocket. At that point, we'll have preliminary orbital insertion at 8 minutes and 49 seconds into the flight, marking the point where the crew members will be in space. Seconds after Soyuz reaches orbit, the vehicle's command and control system will be activated. Stored computer commands will deploy navigation and communication antennas, and the solar arrays will be deployed to collect power for use by the onboard batteries to generate electricity for the Soyuz systems. The first antennas to be deployed will be the Kurs rendezvous and docking antennas, which will be used to provide automatic range and rate of closure information on the final approach by the Soyuz for its docking with the Poisk module. Immediately after reaching orbit, the crew will oversee the programmed activation sequence of a variety of systems just before the spacecraft passes out of range of Russian ground stations. Those systems include the spacecraft's power supply system, its radio communication system, and the critical motion control system. During the first orbit of today's flight, the Soyuz will automatically execute the first 2 of several orbital adjustment burns planned as the vehicle fine-tunes its path to the International Space Station. Today's flight will mark the 10th of the Soyuz modernized systems, or MS series of the vehicles, which is why this is called the Soyuz MS-10. The Soyuz rocket stands 162 feet tall and weighs 680,000 pounds. It consists of the Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft inside a protective shroud at the top and the three-stage Soyuz FG booster below. The spacecraft was mated into its booster, and the three main stages were joined together last Wednesday. And then the entire rocket began its trek to the launch pad just after 7 a.m. Baikonur time on Tuesday, arriving less than 2 hours later, where it was raised to its vertical position, as you see it here, for final pre-launch preparations. The spacecraft, with its three crew members on board, sits high above the three stages of the Soyuz booster, which uses kerosene and liquid oxygen as a propellant. The first stage has 4 liquid engines strapped to the side of the core vehicle. Each will burn for about 1 minute, 58 seconds, before they drop away. The core engine of the first stage also serves as the second stage and continues to burn until 4 minutes and 57 seconds into flight. Seeing here the animation of launch. Again, that first milestone is when the 4 liquid engines strapped to the side fall away.
Burlaki, 10 minutes launch readiness, 10 minutes now. This is the last one with coffee, 10 minutes readiness.
That is the jettison of the shroud that covers the Soyuz capsule itself, and here is a separation from the second stage. The third stage has a single engine that ignites just before separation of the second stage and helps to push it away. It burns for 8 minutes and 45 seconds, and then at that point, the Soyuz will have reached its preliminary orbit. This Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft is scheduled to dock to the orbiting complex later today. 4 orbits after today's launch. That's planned for 9:44 a.m. Central Time, and this is a one-day rendezvous that will culminate in that same-day docking for the first time in about a year. Once it does arrive, Russian and American dignitaries, as well as guests and family members, will be watching the events unfold from a hotel not far from the launch site in Kazakhstan, offering them the chance to speak with Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin once they have arrived at the space station. Still continuing to see a live view of the Soyuz MS-10 on its launch pad in Baikonur, Kazakhstan, where Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin are waiting for launch, now just 12 minutes and 41 seconds away. The whole Soyuz spacecraft is 23.5 feet long and weighs 15,650 pounds. It's comprised of 3 modules. The descent module, situated in the middle of the Soyuz vehicle, contains customized seats, as you can see in this video, for the crew members to use during launch, entry, and landing. It also contains all the controls and displays necessary for the flight, as well as life support systems, batteries for the reentry and landing, and the parachutes and soft landing rocket engines that slow the Soyuz just before touchdown when it lands in Kazakhstan. There are 8 hydrogen peroxide thrusters located on that module that are used to control the spacecraft's orientation or attitude during the descent until parachute deployment. And it also has guidance, navigation, and control system to maneuver the vehicle during the descent phase of the mission. The descent module weighs 6,393 pounds with a habitable volume of 141 cubic feet, and approximately 110 pounds of cargo can be returned to Earth in this module. The descent module is the only portion of the Soyuz that survives the return to Earth. Through a hatch, you can now see the orbital module, which is at the top of the Soyuz, connects to the descent module via that pressurized hatch. It's where the crew has a small amount of room to move around during the flight to the station. It has a volume of 230 cubic feet with a docking mechanism, hatch, and rendezvous antennas located at the front end. The docking mechanism is used to dock to the space station, and the hatch allows entry into the orbiting complex. The rendezvous antennas are used by the automated docking system, which uses radar, to maneuver toward the space station for docking. There's also a forward-looking window in the module that the crew can use to take manual measurements of distance and closing speed with a laser rangefinder in the event of a failure with the rendezvous radar system. The propulsion module houses the oxygen storage tanks, the main engine, and the attitude control thrusters, avionics, and communications and control equipment. The propulsion portion of this module handles all orbital maneuvers, including those needed for the rendezvous with the space station and the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft's mission.
5-minute readiness is
Before they are deployed, the 2 solar arrays that are included on the space station, or on the Soyuz vehicle, are folded up against the body of the propulsion module, which then separates from the descent module after the deorbit burn, along with the orbital module.
how copy.
Solar panels span almost 35 feet. The entire spacecraft serves not only as a crew transport vehicle to and from the space station, but also as an emergency return vehicle in the event of the crew needing to leave the space station unexpectedly.
Ready. we are watching you. We are seeing you on camera number 1.
A group of NASA representatives is there in Baikonur, just a short distance away from the launch pad. And for an update on the activities there, we're going to go now to NASA Public Affairs Officer Rob Navius.
Brandy, it's a mild afternoon here in the Central Asian desert as a new crew prepares to begin a 6-hour journey to the International Space Station for the start of a 6-month mission. Just 1 week after a trio of space station residents landed northeast of the Baikonur Cosmodrome, 2 new residents are poised to replace them. U.S. and Russian space officials and a large gathering of family and friends are here at the Cosmodrome for this launch, which has a senior management flavor. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine is here for the first time, taking in a Soyuz launch after a tour of the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia, earlier in the week. Bridenstine and Roscosmos head Dmitry Rogozin have met face-to-face, expressing support for continuing international cooperation in space. After launch, we'll stay put here in Baikonur to monitor the 4-orbit fast-track rendezvous and docking some 6 hours from now, and a couple of hours after that, the hatch opening and the welcoming ceremony between the arriving crew and the trio on board the complex. Today's launch comes less than 6 weeks before the 20th anniversary of the launching of the Zarya module atop a Proton rocket just a few miles from this Soyuz launch site of the Cosmodrome, a milestone in human spaceflight history that marked the birth of the International Space Station. That's it from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Now back to you at Mission Control in Houston.
Thanks, Rob. Now back with a live view inside the Soyuz capsule where the crew on board is already in the final minutes of their time on Earth before launch today at 3:40 a.m. Central Time, just 7 minutes away now. You can see here Nick Hague at the top of the screen and Alexei Ovchinin at the bottom. At this point in the countdown, 7 minutes away from launch, the pre-launch operations are complete and the Soyuz first and second stage engines are ready for launch. Also, telemetry has been received from the rocket indicating that all primary and backup systems are ready for launch. At the time of launch, again, which is coming up at 3:40 a.m. Central Time, the space station is going to be over northeast Kazakhstan near the Russian border, moving from southwest to northeast, with an altitude of about 254 miles above the Earth. It will be about 948 miles in front of the Soyuz. Launch is precisely timed for the moment when the Earth's rotation will place the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the plane of the orbit of the International Space Station.
Control is on board, and I will provide the report of the launch. This is Burlak 1. I copy. We are ready for launch.
Now under 6 minutes away from launch. At this point, the launch key has been inserted in the launch bunker, and it is a real key. It transitions the launch from sequence into automatic mode.
Launch key inserted.
Now less than 5 minutes away from today's launch. At this point, onboard systems will be switched to onboard control, and the commander's cockpit displays and controls will be activated. The crew members are closing their helmets now and putting their suit, which will put their suits on oxygen.
Run 1 command. Ground measurement system is activated. Combustion chamber nitrogen purge.
Fuel lines and other elements of the rocket engines are purged with nitrogen to fireproof them by removing vapors of fuel and oxidizer. Now T-minus 3 minutes and 55 seconds.
This is Burlak 1. I copy loud and clear. It's great. Copy.
Getting okay signs and thumbs up from the crew on board this Soyuz there. Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin now 3.5 minutes away from today's launch. This will be the first time for Nick Hague to visit the International Space Station and the second for Alexei Ovchinin.
Run 2 command. On-board measurement system is activated. Ground ceiling oxidizer nitrogen is terminated.
Я Бурлак 1, 3 минуты до контакта подъема.
This is Burlak 1, 3 minutes before the liftoff. Everything is well on board. We are feeling well. Thank you. Copy.
2 minutes and 45 seconds away from launch. The booster tank will be pressurized for flight. This optimizes the flow of fuel and helps add structural support to the rocket.
Booster propellant tank pressurization initiated.
And that call indicating that the pressurization has started for the booster tank, again optimizing the flow of fuel. One minute and 15 seconds now into launch. The ground propellant feed has now been terminated.
Yes, it's better now, guys. Thank you.
And now just 1 minute to go. Soyuz now on internal power. We may see just a minute or so of in-cabin views, but then we'll switch to external views of the Soyuz during today's flight.
Vehicle to internal power.
First umbilical tower there separating from the booster. "30 seconds now until launch. Ground umbilical to the third stage has been disconnected, and in just a moment the second umbilical tower will separate.
Power on board.
There's the second tower.
Command for ignition, oxygen.
Launch command has been issued. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Engine turbo pump at flight speed. Engines at maximum thrust. Lift off.
And there is liftoff of the Soyuz MS-10 to the International Space Station, carrying Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin to the orbital complex. This again is Nick Hague's first time to launch to space, and Alexei Ovchinin's second.
One copy. Everything is good on board, and we are feeling well. Copy. Burlak 1.
Hearing good first stage performance for the Soyuz, delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from its 4 boosters and single engine.
This is Burlak
Again, the first stage of the Soyuz measures 68 feet in length and 24 feet in diameter. It's burning liquid fuel for the first 2 minutes and 6 seconds of flight.
Секунд.
60 seconds into the flight. The pressure in the chamber is nominal. Burlak 1, copy. Everything is well on board. They're tuning well. Thank you. Copy.
Everything proceeding as intended for today's flight. Now just a little over a minute into it. The velocity of the Soyuz is about 1,100 miles per hour. View here of the crew inside the Soyuz now making their way to the International Space Station. Nick Hague there at the top of the screen and Alexei Ovchinin at the bottom.
Burlak 1, copy. Everything is well on board. The crew is feeling well. Copy.
View here of the Soyuz making its way into space. Everything looking good. Proceeding nominally.
Inaudible.
And we have the escape tower for the Soyuz now jettisoned. Everything continuing nominally. The 4 strap-on boosters have been jettisoned and they've completed their job, dropped away at an altitude of 28 statute miles. Soyuz traveling about 3,350 miles an hour.
Is it emergency booster 2 minutes 45 seconds? The emergency, the failure of the booster. Failure of the booster. BS, yes, BS. Separation. Enable power.
190 seconds into the flight, Soyuz traveling about 4,700 miles per hour.
Don't be in a hurry. Burlaki, copy. We are in weightlessness, according to our sensations. Stand by. Burlaki, do you have F1 illuminated? 11:42:17 failure. 11:42:17 is the time of the failure. F1 on SP is illuminated. Copy. The shroud is separated. The crew is feeling well. Everything is well on board. We have routes in our hands and the power is on. Copy. So what are the recommendations of the ground? What about the separation? Did the separation go through? Yes, it did. 11:42:55. Burlaki, did you deactivate root power? No. Did you activate the root power? Yes, the root power is on. ON. Now, please send the S command. Ballistic descent command is sent from root controller. Copy. 11:45:30. The S has been sent. We have the indicator illuminated. The overload has started. Yes, we are getting ready for the deload. Time 12:46. G-load is 6.7. Copy. We feeling rotation. The G-load is going down. 1846.20. G-load is 272 and going down. Copy, Burlaki. So tighten the straps in work.
Hearing there that there has been an issue with the booster, and we're standing by for information as we